Hello, and welcome to the GPS 200 Module 4 presentation, Theory of Planned Behavior. Before we dive into the theory of planned behavior, we need to explore another theory, the theory of reasoned action, which preceded the theory of planned behavior. So let's dive in. The theory of reasoned action was originally developed in 1967, and it was further developed during the 70s. Fishbein at the University of Pennsylvania and Ashzen at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst were both working on similar concepts to explain human behavior. Fishbein and Ashzen collaborated to create and publish the model in 1980. By the 1980s, the model was commonly used to study human behavior. The theory has been and is still used in political science to predict voter behavior, in healthcare to predict health-related behaviors, and in education to predict persistence toward educational goals. The model originated in the field of social psychology. The concept of attitude as a trigger and predictor of human behavior was well developed. However, when the concept was tested, studies could not link attitudes and behavior. Fishbein and Ashzen concluded something must mediate or come between the two variables, attitude and behavior. So to recap, the relationship between attitudes and behavior was conceptually sound. However, studies did not back up the theory. Therefore, Fishbein and Ashzen concluded something must mediate or come between attitude and behavior. A mediating variable either completely makes the relationship between the independent variable, in this case attitude, and the dependent variable, in this case behavior, possible, or at least influences the direction and strength of the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. What variable do you think mediates attitude and behavior? Think about it this way. Why might people have a positive attitude toward a behavior but not actually engage in that behavior? What is missing? What is not strong enough? One question about the missing variable is answered when we explore some assumptions of the theory of reasoned action model. For one thing, we do not accidentally behave. We think about the consequences and implications of our behavior, then we decide whether or not to do something. Also, behavior is intentional. People do not do things they did not intend to do. Human behavior is under the voluntary control of the individual. Therefore, intention must be highly correlated with behavior. In other words, whether or not a person intends to perform a behavior, whether it is to vote for a particular candidate, lose weight, stop smoking, finish school, and so forth, should correlate with whether or not they actually do the intended behavior. So we see that intentions are the missing variable. As this more elaborate model depicts, there are two predictors of behavioral attentions: attitudes and subjective norms. Attitudes toward a specific action. Attitudes are shaped by beliefs and evaluations of behavioral outcomes. What do I believe will happen if I engage in this behavior? Our attitudes, then, are our conclusions about the outcomes. Is the outcome desirable or undesirable? Subjective norms regarding that action. Normative beliefs. Subjective norms are shaped by normative beliefs. These are the expectations of people in our social or professional network. And subjective norms are about our motivation to comply with those expectations. Do I want to do what those in my network tell me? How much? Why? As is the case with most theories, there are some limitations of the theory of reasoned action. The main limitation pertains to people who have little power over their behaviors or believe they have little power. As a result, Ashzen added a third element to the original theory: perceived behavioral control. Ashzen also changed the name of the theory to the theory of planned behavior. The theory of planned behavior equals theory of reasoned action plus perceived behavioral control. Let's break down perceived behavioral control. Like attitudes and beliefs, perceived behavioral control also is comprised of two elements: self-efficacy and controllability. Self-efficacy is an individual's belief or perception that he or she can actually perform the behavior. Self-efficacy and how it is developed is so important. There's a lecture devoted to it later in this unit. Controllability: sometimes things are simply out of our control. We may intend to buy a product, but when we arrive at the store, the product is sold out. So as the model shows, perceived behavioral control influences intentions and may serve as a mediating variable between intentions and behavior. Actual behavioral control is simply one's actual ability. Intentions are conative in nature. They are about desire. Intentions immediately precede behavior. Behavior is the observable response with regard to a given target or goal. According to Fishbein and Ashzen, behavior has four components. 1, the action performed. 2, the target at which the action is performed. 3, the context in which it is performed. And 4, the time at which it is performed. A simple example is buying, the action, a used Ford Mustang, the target, at my favorite car dealership. The context, within the next 30 days. Time. The action is buying. The target is a used Mustang. The context is my favorite dealership, and the time is the next 30 days. The theory of reasoned action works best when applied to behaviors that are under the person's control, or they think they are. The theory of planned behavior works best when the behavior is not perceived to be under the person's control. Factors such as demographics and personality still are not in the model. The more time between behavioral intent and actually doing the behavior, the less likely the behavior will happen. This theory assumes people are rational and make systematic decisions based on available information. In other words, this theory doesn't take unconscious motives into account. Should you be interested in learning more about these theories, please check out the references noted here that are utilized within this presentation. Thank you for your time and attention during this presentation. Have a great day.